Brent, how are you, sir?
Great, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing well. I am pumped to talk to you. You did disappoint me though, because when I hit you up to ask where I could get a sheep leather Sherpa jacket, and you're like, go to this place, $1,000. I was like, I cannot do this. I so desperately want a baller sheepskin jacket, but like I can't take out like a loan to get it.
Absolutely. Well, you might be able to find something somewhere else, or could certainly supply you with a pelt over there at Northwest Premium when we get done, but you might have to tan it yourself, put it together. And
oh my God. I'm going to get a hold of Elliot at Northwest, be like, give me the pelt. So wait, if I wanted to tan, like real talk, if I wanted to take a sheepskin and tan it, I would have to first scrape off all of like the connective tissue and all the fat off the back side of it, right?
as far as I know.
Okay. So, and to do that, you have to like stretch it over a thing, and you're like running essentially like a dull knife over it.
You're talking to the wrong guy, but this all sounds right.
I saw a YouTube video once. Man, it's one of those things that used to be like they were used for bomber jackets in World War II. I mean, they're very, very durable. They're incredible utility, but it's from an industry that's like dying slowly.
Absolutely. Well, and the U.S. military is still one of the largest buyers of wool for U.S. sheep producers. And wool used to really be the primary income source for a lot of people that had sheep. That's changed in the last little bit. Wool's probably 15, 10%, sometimes less, depending on the type of sheep you have. And it's really shifted to more of the priority being on the meat.
Okay, but what's the smart wool stuff? Because the classic issue with wool is like you just scratch yourself to hell, right? Like that's not very comfortable. Like my dad was in the army. We had like one of those green army blankets, and it's like you just it's like they work, they keep you warm, but like scratchy as all can be.
Sure, and that was probably coarse graded wool, which is extremely cheap relative to the finer stuff. So I'm not super familiar with exactly what the percentages are, right?
Gotcha.
But assuming it's 100% wool, it's probably something that's a very fine micron. And that stuff's generally a little easier to work with.
Gotcha. So you are engaged in the sheep industry in Idaho. Again, as you're articulating, largely for consumption purposes, although some for fabric. But this is an industry that has a very, very deep, rich history with the state of Idaho, but is dying like this slow, painful death for a multitude of reasons. Market volatility, international markets infiltrating and really taking hold. Preference with other more durable and less volatile products like beef or pork. Talk to me about this, because again, even our governor, his grandfather, is my understanding, and I've never met the dude. I've met the governor, not his grandfather, but he was like the sheep king, he was, it's my understanding, was part of the wave of larger sheep producers that wanted to stay in business, essentially gobbling up the smaller guys, and they were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But even those large sheep operations are now contracting a bit.
They are. There's a few still in the growth phase, but there's a lot of things that make it difficult to continue to grow and be profitable and productive in the sheep industry. There's, as we were just talking about, several reasons why there's not a lot of young producers in the industry. Part of that is just the cost and the sheer space and access and knowledge to do so is not there. And part of it,
if I may ask, like, what do you mean?
Oh, so for example, there's some large operations in southeastern Idaho.
Okay.
Toured one this summer. Say they have somewhere between 5,000 and 8,000 ewes, so you'd call that 5 to 8 bands of sheep.
Okay.
They work a lot with H-2A program labor, so generally those are folks from Peru that kind of help go out there and be with the bands and help manage the flocks. Those people are hard to get, and that's becoming a more difficult process for them all the time. Very difficult, almost impossible to find local or native to the U.S. people who are willing and interested in doing that for what they're able to pay them to make it work.
And we have a Peruvian labor force because there's a culture of sheep management in Peru, or that's just where they're grabbing people?
I believe that's the case, and it's where that program, I know we have H-2A program farm workers coming in for all variety of different industries, but Peru seems to be where most of the sheep herding labor comes from. And really, there's guys that have great experience with that. There's an outfit over here in Emmett. Actually, he runs right close to where we are right now. His sheep band's kind of run by the Avamore area. I think he actually drops off there with a truck once a year.
Gotcha.
And he's got a father and a son that work for him, and they come up together every year.
So labor is difficult.
Labor's difficult.
But why would that prevent younger guys from getting it?
You can get in on a small scale, absolutely. And there's lots of different ways to do that. The amount of acreage and space, and to get let's say you wanted to be a large operator, you basically need to go in and buy their permits, all the use, and then you're generally going to finance that. Interest is not cheap. It's fairly expensive.
Sure.
And you get into the sheep industry, and in the cattle business, there are a lot of great risk management tools. They have insurance programs, livestock risk protection insurance, ways that they can price risk manage those animals a little bit, in addition to contracts. And there's more places they can go with them. In the sheep industry, we actually would refer to the sheep industry not as perfect competition like a lot of agriculture, but as a oligopsony, which is a very few buyers market. And so there's only a couple guys that do contracts. Really, there's one company that's, I don't know if they're 50%, but probably somewhere close to that benchmark of all domestic sheep will go through that plant, or one of their two plants in Colorado and California. There was a large co-op plant out in Colorado that shut down during the COVID window. And another large one in Texas just came back online, helps balance that a little bit. But so there's not very many places to go with them at scale. And so,
gotcha. So the bottom line is, as you have fewer buyers, they obviously drive down the purchasing price because that's just the way it goes. Because they're buying a lot and at scale, then they're like, well, I want a slightly better and better and better price, and we're going to buy, but you'll make up for it because we're going to buy like 100,000 of them.
Sure. Well, and you try to forecast what is consumption going to be. On average, a person in the U.S. eats about a pound of lamb a year, and that is a very few people eating a lot, and almost everyone eating none is what that averages down to. And so every time
we need more Greeks here.
Absolutely.
That's what we need.
There's we work with 2 Greek restaurants in town that are both fantastic, and
dude, we gotta do something on location. Next conversation, we're going to the Greek restaurant.
Okay.
I love Greek I love Greek food.
One of them's just up the road over here.
What is it?
Cool. Costas Taverna.
Dude,
it's off Eagle Estate. Yeah.
Let's go. I love lamb.
Yeah.
Oh, it's really good. Okay. So bottom line is it's not as popular a protein as it once was, or just
consumption has fallen in favor of things like chicken and beef, partly because we've done a terrible job marketing, and kind of the legacy story. So we were talking about history stuff when I got here is in World War II, they shipped 2 things overseas to the troops in a 55-gallon drum, diesel and mutton. And so mutton versus lamb, right? So we don't deal in the mutton business. Mutton is anything from a sheep that's over 12 months old. Depending on who you talk to, that number changes from 12 to 18 months. The standard definition is 12, and
gotcha.
we certainly subscribe to that.
I've never had mutton. I love lamb. What's with mutton?
So if you really like that flavor, that flavor can be a little more enhanced. And so it's the same thing as if you're going to go out. Are you a hunter?
Not
okay.
The way I'd like to be.
Fair enough. But if you were to go shoot something young to eat versus something old that's been out and it's been in the rut and stuff, especially same reason why we don't do any intact rams. Everything's a castrated male or a female, just because you have that flavor change based on some things that happen that I don't fully understand. That's not my purview.
Fully understand.
But
let me tell you, I got a 13-year-old and his armpits stink. So like, I understand. He's, I could imagine for some wild animals, like, you're stanky.
Oh yeah. Well, and there's a certain age where, like, if I'm just going to eat it myself, it's probably fine. It hasn't really had a chance to develop or change anything.
Sure.
After a certain point, certainly we can get there.
So bottom line is, diesel and mutton go overseas in World War II. Then what happens?
And so you had the troops eating this absolute terrible mutton out of a can, just like you would envision Spam, but much, much worse. Oh, and so everybody came home and said, under no circumstances will I ever in my life again touch lamb or mutton. because they viewed it as all the same. And so after that, you have this huge decrease in consumption. And then again, a policy that I'm not super familiar with, but one that's blamed often is you had the Taylor Grazing Act, which apparently made it more difficult for some of these large ranches and operations to do what they did. And so you had some of these confounding factors. Wool got to be less used. We started to get better with kind of our synthetics that most of our clothes are made out of now. Problem with wool is it's very difficult and expensive to clean. It's lasts too long for the companies that like to sell us clothes, right? They want to sell it to you twice, or three times.
So it doesn't have the same level of planned obsolescence.
Correct. So wool's too nice. It doesn't wear out as fast. So companies don't want to make stuff out of wool. They're not going to make as much money.
Well, it's the same thing with like the light bulb manufacturer that made light bulbs that last forever. Like they pop up every now. My grandma was actually telling me a long time ago when I was like 22. She's like, every year they call. I was at her house for like Thanksgiving. And I'm like, who calls, Grandma? She's like, the light bulb people. I'm like, Grandma, what's going on with you? It was like, who are the light bulb people? And I guess she had purchased these forever light bulbs from some company. And every year they would call. They're like, hey, would you like more light bulbs? And she's like, no, they still work. They'll work forever. And legit, they were working forever. I think the longest lasting light bulb that has been turned on consistently is in a firehouse, I think in like Massachusetts or something. And it's been on for like 100 years.
Wow.
And it's still on and it still has power. And it even has like backup batteries and everything. Cause it's like, you can't lose power to the longest lit light bulb ever. But that's one of the arguments. So it's like, yeah, everything we have has some degree of planned obsolescence because in the absence of it, the manufacturer wouldn't be able to stay in business to keep manufacturing it.
Absolutely. So, but our version of planned obsolescence is we want you to consume it and then come back and enjoy it and come back and eat more. Right?
That's not planned obsolescence. That's utility
Absolutely.
and enjoyment. I love a lamb. I have a pig roasting oven and I did a whole lamb in it one time for my buddy's birthday. And like dude, it was wild. I had this lamb covered in rosemary, olive oil. I had this big old thing of rosemary brush that we were like dipping and spreading everything. It was so good. You know what the difference is though, also with lamb, when you're doing a lamb roast like that, you're literally like cutting up steaks. Like you're trimming it down. It's not like whenever you do a pig, right? Just little swine and there's just pull a bone out and everything falls apart. And you're like, oh, great. And I have these like Wolverine claws I pick up. Yeah. So they're really interesting. It literally like your Wolverine has these big things because when you do a whole hog and it comes off, the hog's at cooked temperature, right? So it's, whatever it is, 160, 170. Whatever temperature you like it at. But then and the mass of it is so great that you're sticking your hands into this meat. You have gloves on and stuff, but you stick your hands in to like shred it. And it's like 170 degrees and just scorching your hands off, right? So these claws are really cool because you could like cut off a portion of it, grab it with the claws, put it in a tray, and then shred it like this with the claws that don't fall apart. Because of course, every single serving fork I have in my, drawer is like all bent with because I like go in there. Anyway, yeah. So the Wolverine claws, it's really, really easy to shred and serve pulled pork. But with lamb, you got to have a guy there like cutting and then slicing. And, it's not the case that, with pulled pork, the only thing that's going to happen is it's going to dry out and just pour the fat back on it in the tray. That's quite delicious, by the way. But with lamb, there's not like, once you go past a certain point, it's like, no, you just have well done lamb. And like nobody's really standing. Well, some people may, but I'm not a huge fan of like super well done stuff. Are you a well done guy?
No,
it's so good when it's not well done.
No, I was showing somebody just a couple hours ago at the farm store rack of lamb that I did on the Traeger last week just to play with it, and they took a look at the picture. They said, "Oh, so you like that rare?" I said, "No, that's 135 degrees, medium rare. It's absolutely perfect."
It's perfect,
and that's the worst thing you can do to really any meat is overcook it. So,
what did you do? Did you do like a rub on it? What'd you do?
I did, and that particular rub, I was trying out a couple. There's a guy in Meridian.
My mouth is watering right now, by the way. If we had a rack of lamb here, I would just crush it. Anyway, keep going. So
a guy named Jared Pullman does a barbecue influencer type stuff. It's called How Low Could You Slow? And he had given me some samples to try. And so I was trying one of those out. It had, it was like a charcoal rub, activated charcoal. Made it a little dark, but it was very good.
Did it clean you out? Like that's what activated charcoal does, right? Like they give that to people that need like a cleanse.
I didn't put it on too thick, so he said that's like one of his most popular things. He just wanted to try it. It was pretty good.
Did he tell you to take your shoes off so you could ground yourself while you were cooking the lamb? I'm just wondering.
No. He
Okay.
didn't.
Maybe
I should have.
Yeah, for sure. Feel the earth that the lamb walked on as you're cooking the lamb with your activated charcoal.
Oh,
If only.
There's a few things I need to get a little bit more in touch with my spiritual side sometimes.
I guess you do. Yeah. I have, speaking of barbecue stuff, I have a buddy who actually just came out with this epic product. And it's called the Woolly Bully. So Weber kettles. I really like a Weber kettle, but obviously like there are some downsides to Weber kettles. You know, the Traeger's essentially like the microwave of the barbecue world.
Sure.
But for my barbecue enthusiast friends that I know, they're like, listen, you need charcoal. Like charcoal's a real way to go, right? So they all have these Weber kettles. Green Egg actually took a stab at the Weber kettle, but the problem with the Green Egg is that it's like $2,000, right? And you get these big Green Eggs and it weighs like 1,000 pounds. It's always got to be on the caster wheels and stuff. Anyway, so he's stuck with the Weber kettle and he was like, you know, I wish there was something like we make pizzas, like if only we could get this hotter, right? And of course he has the accessories where he's got the little fan that he inserts that like, you know, brings more oxygen and whatnot to the charcoal. But what he makes is this cap that goes on the top half of the Weber kettle. So it's literally just a topper, right? It's fire retardant. It's like all of these different things and it insulates the top of the, so you can put your hand on the top of the Weber kettle. So first off, now when you're taking the lid off, you don't burn your buddy or your kid. If somebody bumps into it, they don't get burnt, but he can get the temperature of the Weber kettle up something like 200 more degrees because you don't have all the heat loss out of the top. It is wild, man. So I'm getting one and I am going to go so hog on this thing. It is fantastic. But I was like, Max, you got to get the Woolly Bully in with like the barbecue influencers. Cause one, they'll love it. And two, that's like, you know, shout it out, but he's not a social media guy. So
yeah,
he focuses on his protein.
We've all, I've certainly learned to be more of that than I used to be.
Yeah.
So
yeah. What is the guy? You said the guy in Meridian does?
Yeah. His name's Jared Pullman at the company's How Low Can You Slow? And I think he's got his stuff over there in Modern Barbecue. And
that's awesome.
Anyway, it was good. I tried it. Generally my go-to is like just a Mediterranean Greek style blend, you know, some rosemary, some thyme, salt, pepper, something like that.
I'm a big fan of that. You know, like I did a whole hog roast for my buddy's rehearsal dinner. He's getting married. This was a few years back and his wife is Greek. So I made a rotisserie on the side. So I had this rotisserie engine and a rod from a barbecue that I had actually thrown away, but I was like, keep that thing. So I kept and then I, you know, obviously made it into a rig and I did a leg of lamb and my mouth is watering. So, and it's a classic thing like that, added mint, you know, some other things, but her family like went crazy for it. My question is, I don't never mess around with like sweet rubs. So like, do you ever mess around with like the cherry rub or something like that?
I have a rub that actually this restaurant I was telling you about over here off Eagle Road.
Yeah.
He also sells seasonings, blends to a bunch of other restaurants.
Sure.
And he gave me one. There's no label on it. He calls it a sweet meat rub.
Oh my God.
And it is my absolute favorite thing to use, but he won't tell me what's in there.
And it has no label?
Yeah, well, because it's just his own custom blend, right?
Oh my God.
And it is absolutely fantastic. It's probably my favorite go-to. I could feed lamb that I put that stuff on to anybody, even people that say they don't like it. And which generally even people that say they don't like it are going to be fine with the stuff that we cook up for them. But we all have a few that take a little extra coaxing and that pretty well gets it done. You can overdo a sweet rub.
Sure.
For sure, but a little bit, absolutely.
Okay, so let's get back. So we have World War II vets coming home. Thank God they came home.
Sure.
And they're like, I will never touch a lamb. I don't care if Mary had a little, I'm not having a little.
Right.
We're getting out of that. And so you see this erosion in consumption.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened? Because again, there are international forces coming in specifically from like Australia and New Zealand, right?
Sure.
That's what you always see at Costco, like New Zealand or Australian lamb.
So
how are they doing it? Like, did they not have the World War II mutton drama?
They didn't have that, and they have a lot of production over there. It's actually a larger part of their plate over in those countries, just culturally. They're used to it. And so they produce a lot, and they do have good production systems. I won't knock them too hard on that, but we got to about, I want to say it was either the 80s or 90s. We did a countervailing duty on some stuff with New Zealand because we found out they were subsidizing their producers to ship it over here. And what happened with that, everybody said, okay, this is going to be great. We'll import less. No, what happened is it's called trade diversion. And so we, instead of importing it from New Zealand, we still imported it, just came from Australia. And so that's what created, it used to be New Zealand was the biggest importer to us. Now it's Australia, and it still is.
So they would essentially take the New Zealand lamb, ship it to Australia. No, they just
we
started
were buying from
them.
us. They were already producing it in Australia. We just started buying it more from them and less from New Zealand because of the tariff against New Zealand.
Oh, okay.
So that's what happened. And so we were still importing. We got to about the year 2000, 1998, 1999, and we got to where we were importing about 50% of what was consumed in the U.S. And sheep producers got together, and they actually passed a TRQ, tariff rate quota against Australia and New Zealand lamb. It didn't last very long. World Trade Organization came in and said, hey, this doesn't really fit what we all agreed to play nice in the sandbox. They're not dumping or doing anything strange. And unfortunately for the sheep industry, Australia and New Zealand are very good trade partners of us. And so oftentimes we get the short end of the stick. We know that. It's not new information for people in the sheep industry that that's the case. So they got rid of that. Really was very little action on that. From about 2002 forward, we've just slowly, our domestic production has declined for a variety of reasons. People getting out of the business, retiring out, selling down and having less. And our consumption has increased, but all of that consumption increase has come from international product. And I actually pulled, because you asked me about this before I came over here, I pulled the number just for where we're at today. So as of October 2024, in just the month of October, we imported 31.5 million pounds of lamb from just Australia and New Zealand.
31.5 million.
In 2024, for the whole year, we're expected to produce about 138 million pounds. So in October, we imported about 23% of U.S. production.
Wow. So
for the year, if we stay on track, we will import about 2.6 more than we produce, or that's about 72% of all lamb consumed in the U.S. will be import.
Okay, so here's the question. If we are essentially even with the amount we produce personally and then the amount we import, why not just say, hey, American lamb and sheep dudes, double it up? Like what are the market forces of the volatility factors that lead people to contract in a market that's obviously purchasing? They're just not purchasing from U.S.
Right. Well, and there's a variety of issues with this. So what it always comes back down to, and you talk about this at the national level, is they say, oh, we don't have enough supply. Well, it's kind of a chicken or the egg scenario. It's kind of like when my wife asked me if we could do a direct to consumer, and I said, nobody's going to want it. Well, you got to have it and try it. And it's gone really well. But you have to start marketing somewhere. I was wrong.
Wrong.
I was wrong.
Your wife was right. Okay.
She
fine.
absolutely was.
Right. How many head of sheep do you have?
I'll say it this way: through the direct consumer and lamb meat business, we'll probably do 700 or 800 lambs in 2024, and we'll probably do somewhere 1,000, 1,200 in 25.
Dude, I am so hungry right now. I mean, I can taste it. And just for people curious, where can they get your direct to consumer product?
So our website is boiselamb.com, and you can order it from us there. We're also in a group called RECO, REKO, Treasure Valley. We're in a group called Farm Deliver Boise, and you can come get it from us. We ship it lower 48, and just had a box that we shipped Monday and landed in New York on Tuesday. So
Look at you. Look at
no,
you.
we're pretty easy to find. One local grocery store, kind of grocery store, Larkin Larder, they're off Orchard in Boise, carries some of our product.
Gotcha.
And then we work with about 10 or 12 local restaurants. And so we always, there's a lot of people that tell us, hey, I love lamb, but I'm the only one in my family that eats it. I say, great, take them to dinner. So
Yeah. And you guys are connected with Fair Idaho as well, right?
we are.
Okay. So the Fair Idaho thing, and I've told people this before, it's so great because it connects these small producers in a web, and there's like, okay, like everybody pull in the same direction. And because of that, it's like instead of one person doing this gigantic order or fulfilling this gigantic need, you have like 7 or 8, cottage or smaller industry or smaller producing guys, and they all push in the same direction. Like we can grab this 1,000 unit order over here, which is fantastic. Like it's so awesome that the small producer gets to get in line and actually engage with larger consumption orders that they wouldn't be otherwise be able to do.
Absolutely. Well, and it helps bridge the gap. We do, probably 90% of our business right now is wholesale with restaurants and grocery stores. And that's a hard thing to swallow. And it's a lot easier for us in the lamb business to do that than it is in the beef business. So you take a cow, you break it down, you've got 900 pounds of meat sitting there.
Right.
And, you only get one brisket. So what do you do when the barbecue place calls and says, hey, I want 50 briskets a week?
Dude, that would be brutal.
Yeah, it's absolutely
I hadn't thought
terrible.
About that.
Absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
That's why there's very little local beef in restaurants, but it's, you talk about the lamb side too. There was somebody, and in fact, one of the people you had on the other day asked me when I saw him at the processing facility, he said, hey, we do everything else, but how do you make lamb work? And the answer is lamb works if you do 10 or if you do 1,000 and nowhere in between. Because you can't do 100 because you start working with a restaurant, you talk to them and you say, okay, yeah, let's put a rack of lamb on the menu. Well, they're going to go through 500 racks in a year. You get 2 on a sheep, that's 250 lambs. Great. So now the question is, are you just going to do it seasonally? Maybe you can do that. Maybe you can be on a summer menu. But if you're going to do it all year round, you've got to grow. Well, they don't just pop out of the ground.
Right.
That's one of the hard parts with agriculture is it takes a long time to build that process. Right. And
so Fair bridges that, like, you don't need 10 to 1,000. Like you can be the 75 or 100 guy, and we're going to put several of you together so we can fulfill these obligations.
Fair is really good at helping facilitate the conversations between
Gotcha.
Basically the growers and then the end user. And generally we figure those things out on our own, but they've done a lot of really great work. We have some really great relationships that have started because of Fair. And very thankful for all the programming that we do with those folks.
That's awesome. Yeah. Okay. So back to this. So we have, what is the volatility that restricts us from doubling our production?
We are in the U.S., we're not perfect competition like you would say a lot of agriculture is. When you talk about your wheat and your corn, your soybeans, it's a homogeneous product. You have lots of buyers and lots of sellers. In the sheep industry, we have quite a few sellers, but very few buyers. So we actually call the sheep industry, it's an oligopsony.
Yeah, you had mentioned that before. So it's that very few people, very few large scale buyers are buying, but we're importing, right? So they're buying from someone.
Right.
So why aren't they buying from us?
They can import a lot cheaper and they can produce it a lot cheaper than we can. And that comes down to taxes and interest and labor and transportation and distribution.
Listen to me. I'm trying to make lamb great again.
I know.
Okay. I'm with you here. Like, is it down to a question of essentially, like there was that big snafu with solar panels coming out of China because they're like, well, they're subsidizing their solar industry so much, like we'll never be able to outcompete them. And then there's this big like buy American sentiment, and people were going after like, Edison Solar or whatever it was, right? So for the lamb industry, it's literally, hey, look, Australia is going to be able to produce it cheaper forever. So if we want to incentivize people towards native grown or, American grown lamb products, we either have to put a tariff on that or somehow make the production end of it for American producers cheaper, which is exceedingly hard to do because, bottom line is like, there's a certain base cost to doing this.
Well, and my argument has been and will continue to be the best thing that we can do is realize that we're going to import lamb no matter what we do. But when the average American only eats about a pound, what if we make that 2? What if we just increase consumption a little bit? What if,
like lamb sliders?
I mean, we could do so much of a better job as an industry, and so that every time we have an opportunity, we'll try to, I'm trying to work with some guys to get into a barbecue competition in the spring and do some stuff downtown tastings. Just get out in front of people, and the American Lamb Board does a pretty good job of that. It's just hard for them to get out. They have a really small budget. Hard for them to get out in front of people and show them the product. And then what happens is, okay, we promoted lamb really well. Now they go to buy American lamb. Guess what? Couldn't find it, so I'm buying import. And so that's actually one of our biggest restaurant customers that we're in with. And we were talking about this a little bit before too. So during COVID really rocked the sheep industry, because you had all these people eating lamb, all these restaurants that relied on it. A lot of it, over half of it's import, right? And so it got there and it sat on a barge and it went bad. Nobody could get it, and so they weren't shipping it over here just because it was too hard to do. And then there was so much demand for it that the price went through the roof. I had a guy tell me that one of my customers used to spend time in Hollywood, said he saw a rack of lamb there for like $180, which is absolutely ridiculous.
Well, it's Hollywood, bro. I mean, come on now.
It's still ridiculous.
It's still a lot.
I don't care where you are.
Still a lot.
And it wasn't a big one. It was like 1.5 pound rack, right? So,
you know what we got to do? Listen, you seem to be a nice guy. I want to help you. This is what we're going to do. Every 3 months, we're going to get together with a different lamb thing, and we're going to do a show, and we're going to eat the lamb. My God, I'm so excited about the prospect of this. I just pitch you the idea. I'm assuming it's going to work, but
be fantastic.
I feel like there are so many awesome lamb options.
Yeah.
And again, it's like, I don't know, maybe it's just me. I know there are people that don't love lamb, but like lamb is just so delicious.
A lot of people they either know somebody that says they'll never eat it because they know somebody that said they would never eat it because of historical reasons we talked about. But a lot of people have just never tried it. Yeah. They're afraid to cook it because everybody says it's hard. It's really not that hard. Yeah. That's why when we started doing this, we said, okay, we're going to do some recipes and try to keep everything to 5 steps or less. And, I'll have people say, hey, how do I grill this thing? And so I have a recipe card that says, turn on your grill.
5 steps.
Set it to 425 degrees.
Yeah.
Get it up there. Place on grill. Flip after 4 minutes. Go another 4 minutes. Take it off. It'll be 130. Check temperature.
Check temp. Call it a day.
Yeah. Seriously.
Use the secret rub.
But people ask us those questions. They want to know, like, how do I do these basic things? And then I also have people like the ones I had at my house earlier this afternoon that are asking me, hey, I want to do a rack of lamb in the sous vide, and what do I have to do? And what kind of rub can I do? And what kind of sauce am I going to put on it? And so you have those conversations too, because there's both sides. There's definitely a lot of people that are getting into lamb because they're a little more adventurous, kind of foodie. And lamb's a lot of fun. It's really good. I was playing with a couple racks at Thanksgiving, and I made a crown roast for the first time. And so, you can't beat that presentation.
You can't beat that. You can't. Okay, listen, I keep interrupting you. So over COVID, all of the imported lamb goes bad on the barges. I remember things like that where they couldn't get the ships in. So then it becomes cost prohibitive for people to actually ship it over here. Mm-hmm. So because there's scarcity and there's whatever demand there is for it that's not being fulfilled, then the price goes through the roof. Mm-hmm. And this is bad because everybody's rich now?
This is bad because then prices fell over 50% in a month, and most of those dollars never really trickled back to producers. And so what did we have happen? Imports got back in. We didn't have enough to sell as a U.S. base. And so our large sellers of lamb made all their people they had to cancel on angry. So they went to somebody else. Well, the only somebody else they could find was import. And then you had a scenario where we had too many lambs in the system. And so July of 2022, I had the opportunity to go tour the lamb feedlot system down in Colorado, just see how they do things down there and some processing facilities.
And they had a lot of lambs down there on feed that were 2 years, a little over 2 years old. The joke was, hey, when are you going to throw those guys a birthday party? So, it's because they're not lamb anymore. So now they're mutton. And so now they've got to find another home for them going through the ethnic trade. And so you're finding all these lambs that were worth $3 a pound are now worth 80 cents a pound.
Oh.
And obviously there's some weight and some age differences that cause all of that. But that's devastating. And then you've got all that stuff in the system. You can't work through it. And so it really...
So that volatility, that backup, that supply chain backup, and then the imbalance with prices, the spike and then the drop, and then the age, because the thing's aging out. Because I've never, and look, I'm an idiot, so I don't know, but I have never heard of somebody being like, oh, well, like this cow will make a great ribeye if it's 24 to 30 months old. But if it's 33 months old, the ribeye's gone. Like, so the product literally has this shelf life as it's growing, and you obviously don't want to, harvest it unnecessarily. Mm-hmm. So that just having that spike and then the drop, the value drop, like, man, that sounds terrible.
It's a non-storable commodity. Well, beef's a little more forgiving.
Right.
And so you have a lot of people that move over to the beef industry. From the time you breed that animal to the time you actually put something in the freezer, it's like a 3-year cycle in beef. And with lamb, it's still about a year. Because you can get one if you were pushing it really hard from the time you breed an animal to in the meat locker in about a year. Generally, it's probably going to be more like 16, 18 months, that total window. Generally, a lamb's about 10 to 12 months old when it goes through the meat system for harvest. But it's a very tight window to hit. And that's why the sheep industry is just booms and busts and booms and busts. You talk to some of the big guys that have been doing this forever. They say, yeah, it's great. I made $1 million last year. The year before that, I lost 5.
Golly.
And so it's a tough sell. And a lot of these guys are looking at their children and they're saying, is this really what you want to do? Like, I don't want to, I'm doing it because I love it. Or they've bought cows too and diversified, or a lot of them farm in addition. There are very few operators left who, at least in the state of Idaho, who sheep is their sole thing because it's so volatile. It's just hard to plan for.
Is there a benefit to wildlife management for having sheep on versus cattle? Because obviously cattle is, again, grazing animals are an integral part of our fire management and mitigation. Because if we don't, like if you have 100,000 acres, just grassland.
Sure.
Okay. What are you going to go mow it? And like try to, chop it, and you're going to mechanically remove all of the grass clippings. Like, obviously if you have these big, grasses that are a foot or 2 feet high and get struck by lightning or something versus grass that's chewed down to 3 inches or lower, you're going to get the fuel load, the whole thing. So for wildlife management or wild lands management, obviously the cattle industry and obviously other grazing industries wildly benefit the state of Idaho. But is there any benefit to a sheep herd over like just having cows?
Absolutely. And so I've got to see if my nomenclature on this is right, but cattle are browsers and sheep are not. And so they'll eat different things.
Okay.
Yeah. Browsers, not Bowsers, or it's like your Chrome browser.
Oh my God, forget it. I had Dr. Phil Bass in here and I got his book before he came in. It's not a cow. And I'm like, I have no idea. He was like dams versus sires versus cat. Like, it's like, I'm out. Like I was really enjoying it, but I'm like, this is too, like, I need some flashcards or something, because the first portion of his book is literally just trying to get you to get the vocabulary correct so you can understand what then goes on in the book. And it's like, I was ill prepared for this.
Well, that's why he's got the definitions, right?
Yeah, right, right.
But no, they eat different things. And then in general, when ground gets really rocky or in high country, sheep are better than cattle for that too. And so there's different areas that they do better than others. And oftentimes, in some of these people that talk about doing holistic systems, if they have multi-species, you'll go behind cattle with sheep or behind sheep with something else, because they do eat different things.
Gotcha.
They prefer different things.
Gotcha. So the bottom line is sheep from a land management do have a place that is unique to them.
Absolutely.
Right. And like maybe goats eat everything or something. I don't know. But like if you're doing a rotation of like cattle versus sheep, you can't just do twice as many cattle to grab the things the sheep are going to eat, because they just flat out won't eat it.
Yeah, I actually saw there's a guy out in South Dakota that shared an article. It's an old piece of research from like 10 years ago, where they were saying that under specific ground circumstances, you can actually run so many cattle and just add a sheep per like every 5 cows or every 10 cows and not change your feed source at all, just because of the differences in what they'll eat. So absolutely a great management tool. And I think that might be one of the growth areas. We talk in the sheep industry all the time about how do we get more production. That might be an area where we do that, is try to encourage people to use the multi-species approach.
Dude, that's wild. I mean, speaking of multi-species, Brad McIntyre from McIntyre Pastures.
Sure.
When he was in the first time, and he was talking to me about his pork, because he does like the best pork ever. Chickens are incredible too. But he was telling me that they house the roosters with the pork, with the pigs, and or at least some are. And he's like, yeah, you'll go in and they're just like standing on the pig. I'm 99% sure he told me that, but it's just. The whole idea of just having a multi-species operation just seems so cool to me, where it's like, okay, it's not just one that's like, this is a collection of things. This is like, and these individual animals have these other, benefits, and collectively you get a much better approach at whatever operation you're going after.
Absolutely. And that might be somewhere where we get eventually on our deal. For now, we stick to the motto of we do one thing and we try to be the best at it, do it really well. Yeah. Because you can, especially as you start learning how to market this stuff and learn how it works and fits together and the best ways to use it, it's a lot of information to keep in one person's head. So yeah, I would imagine. And I appreciate the idea of specialty, because let's face it, I have no skills, but if I had a skill and it was like, podcasting, this is really all I do. I can't dance. I can't fish very well. I mean, like, I can get the hook in the water. There's no guarantee it comes out with it. It's like, I appreciate that. It's just, it seems that and perhaps it's in error, but it seems that the sentiment towards like monocrop production and whatnot has soured, and that it's like, okay, let's get a variety of things going so that we don't deplete one particular thing, or we're not 100% reliant, because the diversification is the thing that prevents the real damage during collapses, right? Yes, and especially when you talk about economic collapses, diversification is key to being able to survive and do those things.
See, I knew we'd come to the same point. It's like, let's diversify.
Or if you own basically all of the steps of production. And so the only piece that we don't do on site is processing. We use Northwest Premium USDA processor, right. Great facility, good to work with.
Yeah, we're gonna do Elliot's going to come in soon. We're going to do a buffalo rump brine roast and then make like tacos out of it.
Nice.
And then what I really want to do is do the Tom and Jerry steak. Is there like the meat bro fad in the lamb industry? Is there like, because the Tom and Jerry steak is one where you essentially just take the whole like hind quarter off of the animal and then you run it over a bandsaw and you have that classic looking steak from like all the Tom and Jerry shows, or any like Fred Flintstone steak. Yep. Where it's the giant steak with the one singular bone in the middle. Yeah. That's it. And it's all like different cuts of the meat, because he just runs it over a bandsaw. So it's like you got tri-tip and you got all these other random things in there, but it's a gigantic steak. It's like this big. Yeah. I'm very excited to do that.
I'm trying to think. The only thing that people talk about like wanting to put in their hands is like a rack chop, but they're not, this big massive thing.
Right.
And
they're like mini tomahawks.
Oh, sure. Yeah. But if you did like a French hind shank or something, the problem is you'd braise it. As soon as you pick it up to hold it in your hand, all the meat would fall right off the bone. I know. So, I mean, is that a problem though?
Good. Is that a problem? But is that but did you die? I would have a shot at it. If we had a giant thing with a shank in it, how long do you have to braise those?
Oh, it depends. I'll usually do them for like 4 to 8 hours, depending on how I'm cooking it. So if you do a stovetop, like 4 hours is fine.
So this is what we're going to do then. Next time you come on, you're going to send me one, or I'm going to buy one and find it somewhere. And I'm going to do it in like my French or Dutch oven, Perfect. Whatever it is. We'll bring it in. We'll have the giant blue Dutch oven. We'll open it and we'll just, it'll be incredible.
Awesome.
So bottom line is, lamb is good.
Lamb is fantastic.
Lamb is good. Idaho has a very rich history with it, which has been hammered for quite a number of reasons. And we should support it because it's really, really good. And there are plenty of people who still are engaged in the, obviously production of lamb. Mm-hmm. And man, it's so delicious. I'm going to have to like dig in it. It's just that lamb bag you brought me. It's like, just as soon as I get home, it's going to be wild.
Yeah. Well, and
I guess some of the things we didn't talk about is we talk about all the import. We didn't really talk about why people should choose American lamb.
Oh yeah, let's talk
Instead.
about that.
You know, let's assume I generally have a taste preference for American lamb as it is, but let's assume everything's the same, just taste wise, and say that we're just looking at other differences. By the time that lamb is transported here, it takes about 3 weeks. And what they've done is, because a lot of these grocers and wholesalers want to sell it as fresh.
Sure.
And so something I've learned in this business is that almost nothing you see in the grocery store was never frozen. Even a lot of the grocery stores I work with, they say, yeah, ship it to me fresh. And then what do? They go put it in their freezer. So
That makes sense.
but the stuff that truly is never frozen, they ultra chill. And so they bring it over at like 28 to 30 degrees. So it never fully freezes, never crystallizes. But also because it's never fully frozen, you've still got a perish timeline on that.
Sure.
And that perish timeline is about 3 weeks. Well, it takes about 3 weeks for it to get here. And then it takes about a week for it to get unloaded off the barge. And then it takes about a week to get to you. So do you still think that's good when it gets to your house? The amount of people who tell me, yeah, I went and bought a rack of lamb at Costco or at Albertsons and opened it up and it just stunk, so I throw it away. That's not good for the industry. But that's what you're supporting when you buy that imported product, is you're buying something that, yes, they've done their best to try to get it to you in a way that you're going to enjoy it, but they failed. And so we need to support people that have actually been able to find a way to do that. The other difference is, and there is a trend where people talk about wanting low hang times and in their animals, but in the sheep industry, there's an old study, and whenever I lose it, and I just want to look it up, it's under Premier 1 lamb palatability. So
Okay.
anybody that listens to this could go find this paper. But talks about what's called the shear force test, and it's basically a measure of how tender your meat is. And basically all lamb in the U.S. is prime or choice quality. And if you compare basically all lamb on that test to just your average beef, it's going to be more tender. And then you take somebody local like us, most lamb, whether it's foreign import or through a large processor, they're going to hang it for a day and then cut it up. At a small scale, we can sit there and let it hang for 5 days, and that almost doubles the tenderness of that meat. And so you're doing these very simple, easy things. It's like
that you can't really do at scale, right? Like that's one of the big problems. Like McIntyre was talking about how their time to harvest something like a hog is like 60 days longer than other people, or same thing with beef, because most of the producers just get it to a certain point of like consistency and they call it, right? He's like, but that extra fat in there, he's like, you've never seen marbling on, like a pork chop. Porks are always super lean and they always cook super dry. And that's the big criticism that everybody has. He's like, but he lets his pork, actually get that intermuscular fat, which gives actual marbling. It's like, oh, the fat's so good. Mm-hmm. I don't put it on a hot barbecue though. That bad boy's flaming up. You're going to torch everything. You got to cook it just right. But so essentially you're saying the same thing, which is, hey, because we're a small producer, we can do these little things that larger scale operations can't do that lead to far superior product.
Absolutely. And honestly, we're still fairly competitive, or that's a pride point for us, as we try to be fairly competitive with your other options, because we want you to feel like you can still do it and not have it break the bank.
Yeah.
It's even at a wholesale level, some of the restaurants we've worked with, it's been pretty entertaining because they're like, oh, it's lamb. We'll see. We're glad to work with somebody local. We can promote that. And then pretty soon after a few months, the orders started increasing. It's like, oh, what's going on? Oh, that product got more popular on your menu. Because more people had a good experience. More people enjoyed it than they thought they would. And so I think, how do we get people to eat more lamb? We just need to get them in front of something that didn't sit for 40 days and open and spoil, right?
Right.
And so
that's a good sentiment. Let's get you in front of some kind of protein that wasn't there for a month and a half.
Right. And honestly, it sounds ridiculous, but that's a terribly difficult thing to do sometimes in the sheep industry. And then the other thing is, you even talk to, so the American Lamb Board has a team of influencers that they pay to travel around. And so
Wait, really?
Oh yeah. So we were the major supplier.
Dude, we should be a team. Let's be a tag team, like of lamb influencers. Let's go all across Idaho making, racks of lamb for people.
You got to be in a little bigger market than I.
Come on, man. Oh, it'd be so great. I want to be an ambassador.
That's what they call him, a lambassador.
Oh my God. This is a job that I was made for. I know a guy with a camera. Come on.
But anyway, so Trailing the Sheep, big festival that we do in Idaho out in Sun Valley. And we were the major supplier of lamb up there. And so the American Lamb Board called us and said, hey, we're flying all of our lambassadors out. We're going to do a chopped style competition. Will you supply some lamb for us? So we gave them, I think, some legs and some grind and some racks, and they split them into teams of 4, and then we get to judge it like a chopped challenge.
Yes.
But we have these people that are using American lamb all the time, and even those people told us that they have a hard time finding what they need from an American producer at times. And that's the other struggle is if we want to improve consumption, we've got to have more people that are willing to keep a little bit of everything on hand all the time so that we can actually supply what we need to. Because I think I said this before, it's kind of the chicken or the egg deal. Sometimes we'll try a different way of cutting things up that we know is people are going to like better, but they've never seen it before.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, I want them to try it, but they can't tell me they want it. Sometimes I've got to show them what it is, let them try it, and then they'll see that they want it, or they'll see how good it is. And we need to be better as an industry about actually having American lamb available for people to buy. So I think I would love to get it out there. Obviously, I'd love it all to be American. Yeah. I'd love it to all be from Idaho.
Yeah.
We make good stuff out here.
Yeah, right.
But because that's kind of my mindset is like, when you buy lamb, I want you to buy mine. If it's not mine, I want it to be from Idaho. If it's not Idaho, I want it to be American. And after that, I still want you to eat lamb because I want you to enjoy
Listen,
it.
everybody needs a Lex Luthor.
So.
Everybody needs contrast. You need the arch villain.
Sure.
I prefer Superman win, but without Lex Luthor, how does Superman define himself? So God bless it. Buy American Lamb.
Absolutely. Make American lamb.
My guy, I really appreciate you. Thank you for coming in today. I really hope we can do some obviously like lamb cooking stuff in the future because I'm with you. I've always loved it. I've always enjoyed it. I have not had a local source for it ever, so I'm super excited to try your stuff. And then let's just start doing like atypical recipes and just do it up.
Sounds great.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Matt.